So welcome everyone. My name is Andrea Bodkin and I'm here with HC Link and my wonderful colleague Gillian Kranias. And we wanted to start our webinar today with a land acknowledgement. Our offices where we're sitting here in downtown Toronto at Health Nexus are upon the sacred land that different Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island have lived on in relationship for 15,000 years. This particular land on the edge of a great lake is the territory of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit River. We're grateful to have the opportunity to work on this beautiful land and live here, and as settlers we acknowledge the land and seek a more balanced and just relationship, a peaceful partnership with the land, the many Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island, and all life around us.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Gillian Kranias, and I'm a settler of Greek, Scottish, and Irish descent. I was born in Toronto. And I've been organizing and working in community development and in nonprofit partnership development for 27 years. The thread that weaves through all my work is supporting people's voluntary initiatives for transforming their communities and enhancing well-being of others. I also bring a strong equity lens to this in each moment and with each initiative. How can we advance equity among us as we work together? That's a question I like to ask. I've been working with Andrea at Health Nexus and the HC Link program since 2014, and I'm looking forward to the webinar. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for being here, Gillian. So it's Andrea Bodkin again, and I'm a settler of Scottish, Irish, and German descent. I've lived in a variety of different places across the country, and I also had the privilege to live in Australia for a year where I did some graduate work and was able to learn a little bit about the Aboriginal peoples of Australia during the time that I was there. I've been working in public health and health promotion for more than 13 years, and every single year of that has involved working in partnership. So I'm really passionate about people working effectively across difference to build healthy communities. So we do have some handouts for you, as I keep reminding you, in the top right corner of your screen. One of them you received about a week ago with your homework assignment, in quotation marks. And we also have one that is hot off the presses. It was just published, I think, on Friday, and it's called Planning for Partnership. And all of the content for today's webinar is in that handout. So if you want to think, oh, what is that point that Gillian and Andrea were talking about, you can go to that resource. The last one in the box, Helpful Tools for Effective Partnerships, that contains every single tool, toolkit, resource, reference that we're talking about in today's webinar. So if you download that, you're going to get access to each of the toolkits we mentioned and where you can find them on the internet. So take a moment to do that. As I mentioned, the webinar is being recorded today, and the recording will be posted on the HC Link website along with the PowerPoint slides and the handout. So what is it that we are doing here today anyways, Gillian? Well, what we're finding is that more and more people are working in partnership. Sometimes because they want to, sometimes because they have to, and sometimes because they just know that that's the best way in order to meet their goals. However, what we are finding is that the vast majority of folks out there working in partnership haven't actually received any training in working in partnership. So when you all registered for today's webinar, out of the 125 of you that responded, 89 of you had not received any training. 29 people attended a webinar or a workshop, and 2 people attended a course. So not only are we not taught how to work well in partnership, we're often taught to work competitively. And I think, Gillian, you had something you wanted to mention on that.
Well, yeah, this is something that perhaps you've all had a self-reflection there already, but in a recent publication, we are working in collaboration with the Ontario Public Health Association on collaborative leadership, a literature review on collaborative leadership by Dr. Roberta Timothy. She did identify, again in the research, not surprisingly, that our education system is based on a more competitive model, and therefore even doing collaborative work in the education sector is very challenging because the structure of the sector is set up competitively, and we can ask those same questions about nonprofit sector, public sector as well.
Mm-hmm. So you are all here today because you're someone who actively participates in partnerships, or you convene a partnership, or you're about to work in partnership, and we just want to say congratulations for being here and for wanting to learn more about how we can all work effectively together in partnership. So we are working on that sound. We understand that some folks on the computer are having difficulty with the sound cutting in and out. I see our intrepid tech person on the case. So today's workshop is actually part of an entire series of supports that we're working on this year to help you work effectively in partnerships together. So obviously we're starting with today's webinar, and what we're going to do after the webinar today is you're going to be automatically directed to a new Eventbrite where you can actually sign up for a 30-minute coaching session with one of our HC Link consultants. And that session's pretty informal. It's just a chat to find out how the material from today's webinar is resonating with you, to learn a bit more about your partnership, and to talk a little bit about what kind of support you might need for you and your partnership to take some kind of action together. And those coaching sessions will be available all throughout the summer. And then in the fall, we're going to have another online event. It's going to be a bit webinar, a bit information sharing. We're going to have one in French and one in English. There's also going to be a French in-person workshop in October, and Gillian and I are doing some workshops, and Gillian and Patrick Delorme, our bilingual health promotion consultant, they're going to do a French workshop as well at our conference. We also have a wide variety of educational resources. They're mentioned in some of the handouts today, and they're also available on our website. So we hope you'll take advantage of the whole range of services that we have to help you work well in partnership together. So today, we're here to talk with you, folks who are already working in partnerships. Maybe your partnerships are going well, maybe they're a little bit frustrating, maybe you feel like you don't have a lot of support and you're spinning your wheels. So we're going to present some simple ways for you to think through and navigate the complexities of partnerships in the form of 6 key activities. As with most things in life, there is no silver bullet. There is no one thing that you can do. We had lots of folks on their registration form saying, oh, I want to learn how to make my partnership more engaging. I want to learn how to keep people at the table. There are lots of things that you can do, and we're going to be talking about that over the course of today's webinar. And part of this webinar is actually to hear about your experiences so that we can see the patterns in your stories. So we're actually going to start not with us telling you stuff, but we're going to start with a learning exchange to learn more about your partnership work. So I'm going to turn it over to Gillian, and we've got some chat questions here for you.
We've opened up the room, so we really would love your sharing here. We'd really like to spend a good chunk at the beginning of this workshop sharing from our own experiences, from our collective experiences. That's where most of our learning has come from, right? So just to let you know, are we going to show the slide about strengths? Yeah, there. It's in the little corner, in the top right corner. So with the registration form, we asked you where you feel your partnership has strengths. And
I was precipitate.
Oh, that's okay.
I'm going to turn that back.
Well, and this is what you said. So this is from the many people over 100 people who responded to that registration. The strengths are around working together for change, planning collaboratively, creating fostering a shared understanding. There are some of you who also have strengths in the area of celebrating and valuing and connecting with partners. But these 2 activity areas do have, it seems we have less strengths to stand on. Can we maybe put it that way? But as we move to the next slide, I want to especially invite those of you who have experiences that you felt were very helpful in those 2 areas, as well as experiences in the other activity areas, to share. So we're flipping back to that multiple chat box place. And what I want to ask you to do, whether you had time to jot down when you were doing the homework or just in the moment now, please share with us what you're most proud of and why. So this is on the left. What are you most proud of regarding your partnership? And why? So let's see if any people get typing in there. And if anyone would like to share over the telephone line, now's an opportunity. What are you proud of in terms of your partnership work and activities? Did you prepare one, Andrea? We thought we would
did.
prepare. Okay, Andrea, why don't you share first?
Well, I'm actually really proud of HC Link, which sounds kind of odd because that's the organization that I'm here representing today. But we were formed about 8 or 9 years ago, and we were formed from 5 individual resource centers. And each of those resource centers was hosted at a provincial organization. We each had our own histories, we had our own mandates, we had our own client groups, and we were directed to form a new entity, the one that is now called HC Link. And we had to work really hard to function well. We had to foster a shared understanding, and we had to create a vision of what HC Link could be. And one of the things that we have found is that the planning collaboratively and working together for change, we have to adjust that about once a year, or sometimes even more often than that. It's really an ongoing process that on an annual basis we kind of take stock and see what's working, what's not working, what do we need to adjust again. And so one of the big things that I've learned 2 big things from HC Link. One is how valuable it is to work with people who are different from you are and have very different opinions. And the other thing is how much work it actually takes and how important it is to constantly reflect on that annual basis or more often to really tweak things and to get everything functioning well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Andrea's written, we have fun as well as achieve results. So celebration and just keeping things light and bringing that in, definitely.
I love that.
Erin says we had a shared vision and both groups got excited about the idea of an end product. So part of that vision was having a product, and now you're working to create a resource. So that working together, as we'll touch on later, often really is the glue of your partnership. Tanya says, I co-chair a wellness coalition. We have a grant program providing up to $1,000 for community projects. This process is something that energizes our coalition members.
Right. Nicole's proud that it exists. I love that.
There you go. Yeah. We celebrate every little milestone because, as we said, it's not easy. Sherry talks about leveraging scarce resources to a common goal, and the partnership on a face-to-face basis helps as new initiatives come up. So that face-to-face, that's a really nice quality that you emphasized in there in terms of success. Nicole successfully sustaining a cancer screening network for 13 years. Congratulations.
Wow, that's amazing.
By fostering a shared understanding and leveraging resources, so everybody shared commitment to that common goal. That's beautiful. Jody, in partnership with Rainbow Health Ontario and Sick Kids Transgender Youth Clinic, in 2016 brought information on care for gender diverse youth in northern, rural, and remote communities. The partnership materials are still being shared years later. You know, so, as someone who's worked, because I've worked across the province, but being from Toronto, another piece that supports these partnerships is just the learning, the constant ongoing learning that we're doing together. Mm-hmm. Let's see, what else do we have that people are proud of?
You had something you were proud of.
Okay, I'll talk.
You probably have lots of things you're proud of. But.
We structured, so I was involved in a neighborhood network when I was working at a community health center, and we had annual planning meetings for that network, and there were lots of subcommittees too for the network. So we asked each subcommittee every year before that planning meeting to reflect and discuss and document their perspectives and activities in relation to the network's overarching mission and values. So we sort of set aside, it was almost like we required some small group work before people came to the day. It was a good way to stretch out the time in the day so that then when they came to that day, they were sharing with us, what did your subcommittee do that best supported the mission and values of our network, and where did you face challenges? And that would then jumpstart the planning day from there. What else has come up on our screens?
So Wellington Dufferin Guelph was telling us that they're able to keep a few partnerships going and maintain the energy. I'm dying to know how they did that. That was over the course of a few different years. And someone else has said providing expertise, support, and skills that are not available in partner organizations that helps the project move forward. That's a really common one that we hear a lot.
That gives you immediate outcomes for the work of working together. Mm-hmm. So I'm finding on the right, we're going to move over, if you put up challenges in the corner there, didn't you? Just leave it small like that. I think that's great. Okay. Just to turn to challenges for a little bit, what we found in terms of what you responded with the registration is that it's pretty evenly distributed across the 6 activities. That little slice, that little dark blue slice, is other. So the 6 activities are represented by all of the other ones. And so interestingly, even when people have strengths, as we saw in the earlier slide, they might still be facing challenges. We're often still facing challenges in the various areas. So once again, some sharing might take us beyond some of those challenges. Let's look up and see what's coming up in this box where we're asking people to share your challenges on the right and what you're proud of on the left. So Andrea talked about being valued for my and our contributions, and Tanya ensuring all partners see their membership as valuable and continue to participate in the coalition.
Yeah.
That right on. And what you were talking you were talking about being proud of maintaining momentum, and these things really get in the way of our energy and our momentum. That voluntary part of partnership, we really need to nourish, make sure everyone's feeling recognized.
And I think Kathy has the number 3 that we hear about quite often, is getting everyone around the table to take an action item away from the meeting. I'm just kind of guessing, Kathy, because this is something we've experienced and we hear all the time, that there's often 2 or 3 partners around the table that do quite a lot of the work, and other folks aren't able to for a variety of reasons.
And here, the next example from Erin sort of can speak to some of that dynamic too. What something came up that was not thought of before, and the partner was not willing to go back in the process and do extra work. So there was that unexpected, which is really a part of partnership. It's constantly coming up. And how do we ensure that partners around the table will be willing to adapt and be flexible and sometimes put in that extra work? There we go, Waterloo and Dufferin is talking about the challenges of equitably sharing the work. Guest number 3 is mentioning staff changes in organizations through the course of the project. This is par for the course, and it does definitely can so easily disrupt partnership, especially if it happens in more than one organization within a short period of time. We'll be touching on that later when we get back to connecting, when we focus on the connecting activities. So sharing tasks, once again, not in rural communities, Tanya's saying we don't have representation from large NGOs, and I'm thinking there that maybe there's some of those NGOs are based in the more urban centers and they don't make that effort to connect out into the regions that they serve as much as is needed. So there's a piece, again, about a little bit about equitable partnership. We did a regional gathering in Ottawa, and that was one of the topics that was discussed. Managing different perspectives, priorities, and expectations, and that's behind everything that people have been bringing up. So again, equity is coming up, and engaging people in a meaningful way. Nicole, yes, meaningful. How do we get there? And we only really know that by working on that shared understanding. So that's where you can see that some of these activities support the others by having deeper shared understanding. Then when we get to the work, we can engage each other in more meaningful ways. And Jody's talking about disappointment from others when we don't have the capacity to partner. Thank you for putting that out there, Jody, because that's the difficulty of a reality where so often our partnership work is not core funded, and so it's something that's happening on the side. And so organizations which have less access to resources, communities, equity-seeking communities even more so, are often going to be more and more taxed and have to say no sometimes. Should we dash over to the left again and see what kinds of successes we can pick up our spirits with?
We were talking about outdoor ovens. Maniela was sharing that they were able to get the first one in Eastern Ontario in Bayshore Park, and I was saying that somewhere in the city of Toronto there's an outdoor tandoori oven, which I still have to find.
Just spoken about. Oh, you wrote that.
Exactly. And Wellington Dufferin Guelph had a great suggestion when I asked the question about how do you keep partners meaningfully engaged, and this is a really terrific answer. We have found different ways to engage different partners, treating them as individuals. So there is no one-size-fits-all when it comes to working in partnership. So that's a really terrific reminder there.
Some people are still typing away. If anyone would like to chime in on the voice, we would love to hear some other voices.
Oh, we would.
I don't know how many of you are on the teleconference. Kathleen's put up a very difficult challenge. It's when members of the partnership are applying for the same funding that the partnership is applying for.
Yeah.
And I've been in those, situations certainly where, we tried to talk about, okay, here's this opportunity and who's applying and figuring out ways that, different groups can apply as leads or, and in as co-leads. But sometimes there are issues where you might be jeopardizing one project's funding by applying again. So that's a toughie.
It feels a bit like Survivor Island out there sometimes.
Diane's talking about having sometimes you have different people representing the organization around the table at each meeting, and it can make it challenging to move forward because you have to take time to catch up. And that, once again, I don't know, I think about, we're going to touch on this more, but the 6 activities, so many of them they're process focused, right? They aren't so outcome focused. And so when our communities so desperately need change, it is so hard for us to spend that and devote adequate time to bringing people up to speed or helping them get oriented. Certainly having some things, on paper can be helpful. Having one person on the side spend time can be helpful. But it will always be there as a challenge. And I guess that's why, as we said, all of these 6 activities came up as challenges because they're somewhat the facts of life. So there's some networking happening right now.
We're going to have some new community ovens as a result of this
That's
webinar.
very exciting. I love a community. There's not one near me anymore, but I used to be close to one. So we want to maybe turn to our next slide and just digest a little about what's been shared. Who grew up with spirograph? This is a spirograph, which unfortunately we didn't have time to create ourselves. We had to grab it off the internet. But just to evoke for us, like, what are these patterns that are emerging from when we look at the strengths, when we look at the challenges? Does anybody have any thoughts to share, new ideas, or maybe something that's just confirming what you'd already thought about or looked at or read about, what's being confirmed and what's being identified as we share these chats. It's pretty amazing with a group of 85 people that we can do that kind of exchange. It's wonderful.
You know what I was thinking, Gillian, while everyone's having a moment to reflect, is that one of the things that's really interesting with partnership work, whenever we do surveys or we ask people strengths, we ask people challenges, we see the same types of responses in both columns. So I always find that really fascinating that, and I think what that speaks to for me is that not every partnership can do everything well. And, if you were to answer that question thinking about one partnership and then answer the question thinking about another partnership, your answers might be totally different. I mean, it's not always about skills and capacity of the people leading the partnership. Sometimes it's just the partnership itself. And sometimes things go well and sometimes they don't.
Yeah. There's so much complexity, right? I mean, that's what we come together to address complex problems, and then the complexity of all of our relationships and the environments we're in. And as the funding changes and shifts, certainly, that one didn't come up, but that's something that if you've been in a 13-year partnership, you've probably come across, and even in a 2-year partnership, you're likely to have come across that inconsistency in terms of resourcing. So it's through all this that we persevere, right? Knowing that it's only in partnership that we can achieve some of these things. So.
And just as an example about how complex these things can get, I was talking before about, HC Link, which is now a partnership between 3 provincial organizations. Because we have staff at each of those 3 organizations, and we're all in different locations, we have to have a manual, basically, that lists all of our policies and procedures and practices so that everyone knows, you know, how we do everything. And if you ever have a question, well, how do I set up a webinar? You just go to the manual and the instructions, the details are all there. It's 48 pages long. And we add to it every year, because every year we realize, or every few months we realize, as complex as that manual is, there's still things that aren't in that manual that we have to add. Now, that's a full-scale collaboration, so it's a little different than
it's a very integrated service.
Very integrated service. However, it can get very complex.
And one of our successes is that we have Andrea as the coordinator who knows that manual in so many ways that I don't know it at all. and that's a real key piece in terms of our partnerships, is we know the value of a coordinator, of somebody who can kind of stay in touch with all the little details and help bring in the new people. Let's keep that vision of what we want for strong partnerships out there, even when we're struggling sometimes because we don't have it. So, okay, I think we'll move on and get into the presentation that we've pulled together for you.
All right, awesome.
So a little bit of background about these 6 activities. I've personally been working with these 6 activities since I began at HC Link, and that's several years ago. And they were first developed by Health Nexus, who has a long history of working in the area of partnership development. When Health Nexus was developing a resource for Health Quality Ontario, the people developing that and doing the research identified the activities that successful partnerships undertake. So when I found that, when I was doing some consultation work for HC Link, I was very excited about this framework. It is not a prescriptive framework. It is a framework which reminds us of the key activities that will support our partnership to be effective and dynamic, keeping that energy, keeping people at the table. So since this was first developed by Health Nexus, it's been used by HC Link in a series of 3 webinars that I did with Kim from Ontario Healthy Communities Coalition, where we profiled stories and identified a wide range of tools related to the 6 activities. Now there's a link to that in the handout that we have posted online for you. It's on the, all those slides are on the HC Link website, and in some areas they're more in depth than what we're doing today, because what we're doing today is in one webinar, and they also have different people from different partnerships coming and telling their stories in relation to certain activities, so that's kind of unique as well. More recently, HC Link, we published the 2-pager on the 6 activities, and now the new resource planning for partnership, which Andrea spoke about at the beginning of our webinar. And all of this work as well has been further nourished by a project that Health Nexus co-led with the Ontario Public Health Association called Collaborative Leadership in Practice. Some of you may be familiar with that project. And that project developed new resources and tools to highlight and support the promotion of equity within the leadership of diverse partnerships. So today we're integrating all these tools and past experiences and bringing them to you in the context of this one webinar. So just to introduce this framework, it's easy to approach this and think of it as steps in a linear process. You might think, oh yeah, I'm going to begin with connect. But this is not a framework of steps. It's not a linear process. These 6 activities are part of a framework of interconnected parts. So we want you to think of this as interconnected parts, sort of with a holistic approach. And I want to mention before we get into, you know, what you can do and what might be helpful, is that you're already practicing these activities already. If you're working in partnership, you're already doing all these activities, and you're probably already blending the activities together as well on a given day with a given agenda. So for example, when you take time to deepen shared understanding among partners before you tackle a strategic planning challenge, that's an example of practicing the 6 activities, right? You might make reference to your shared vision, you spend some time having people reflect and share their unique perspectives, and then you take on that planning collaboratively, because that's how they're interconnected. They each support each other. So that, I hope that that example helps kind of introduce this well to you. So we hope that you will find this framework useful and that it will support you to attend to all 6 activities and to practice them well throughout the life of a partnership. This should help you more easily innovate together, resolve challenges, grow your impacts, and maintain momentum among partners. So now where we're headed is Andrea and I are going to take you on a tour of each activity. For the most part, these will be short explanations, but we prepared longer presentations and extra tools to share related to those 2 activity areas where fewer registrants identified strengths. So that will be at the beginning with Connect, and then the last one that we'll share, Celebrating, Evaluating, and Renewing. I'm just going to take a breath. Sometimes we swap back and forth, and sometimes it's like, whoa, oh, we ended up going on a roll. So I'm going to share about the area of activities under Connect. So first of all, as I mentioned before, this is not a one-off. It does speak to connecting when you're connecting at the beginning, but we also want to recognize that we come back to reconnect and to connect to new partners or to reflect on other people who we might want to invite to the table. This maintains healthy relationships at the core of your partnership process work. So the following in-depth slides will highlight this activity and some related resources that we recommend, hoping that you'll go away with a few more tools under your belt. So we think Connect, we often go right away to thinking about connecting to others. It really needs to begin with connecting to ourselves. It's a reflective process. So this is what this slide will highlight. It's a reflective practice, and it's something to conduct early and often when we're connecting with partners to give ourselves a clearer orientation. It will help us orient to what is it I want to achieve through this partnership? Am I ready to work in partnership effectively? You know, what are my strengths and where are my areas of weakness? Self-reflection matters when your partnership is by choice, and even more so when your partnership is by direction, such as a funder's requirement. We've recently been doing partnership work at a national level, actually, with projects across the country. And at the outset, we're feeling like, yes, it's an arranged marriage. And so we have a lot of reflection to do and a lot of slowing down the process to make sure that we start off well with those organizations and those people. So here are some questions that you can use to guide your reflective process. What do we want to accomplish that would be done better in partnership? Clarifying that and being able to put that out clearly to others, right? That's preparing yourself for the connection. Thinking about our own objectives. How would we like to work in partnership in terms of vision, mission, and values? And again, as I mentioned earlier, what's our capacity and our resources that we can contribute? Identifying advantages for us working in partnership and weaknesses that could be lessened by working with partners. And then very specifically, what can we offer to a partnership? What are we offering to others, and what are our strengths? Finally, what do we need and expect from our partners? These are things to clarify in advance, and then we're going to move forward and communicate them so that once we identify potential partners, we can communicate them well. There's one resource which is in your handout related to this from the Wild Rose Foundation called Working in Partnership Recipes for Success. And we shared that because it's one of the few resources that really includes this part of the connection activities, which is the self-reflection. Moving on. Thank you for taking care of all the slides. Sure. I think we said we would care for our own, but I haven't managed to keep up. So in terms of self-reflection, we also have to do some homework as well. There's a question about our own environment and our location within it. So when we think about connecting, we're trained to research others. We're trained to learn about others and go out and to study them. But it's important that we also look about who are we in the environment, so that when we're connecting with another organization or a person, we're not denying what our social location is, what our history is, etc. So what you see here up on the slide is actually from a resource by H.C. Link called How to Engage Francophones When You Don't Speak French. So in this instance, the question is, okay, if I'm an Anglophone coming from an Anglophone organization, what is the context and history of Francophones working with Anglophones in Ontario and in Canada? What's the history of that partnership or that lack of partnership? There's equity issues. There's been historic marginalization. So recognizing that both broadly and then locally in my community, like when have organizations worked with other organizations across different languages, and what's happened in that situation or in those projects? Because when I approach somebody, that's all the history that will be behind that moment when we connect. So many of you will be familiar with using a stakeholder wheel, and this is then when we feel ready to look outwards, it's like, who's out there? And stakeholder wheel, you can sketch it up on the wall, and it's so simple as a first step to identifying who's out there, and also where are they located in relation to our current work? Are they at the core? Are they at the periphery? Might they be interested, but we've never talked to them to even find out? When you consider the level of participation and sort of whether they're central or peripheral, it's important to recognize that it's not always possible or necessary for all partners to commit at the same level, to be in the core, to be involved. Some of them might just be at a communication level, but that doesn't deny the importance of that relationship as well. And when you do map stakeholders on a wheel, you might want to also draw arrows. Which directions are you hoping that those stakeholders might move to?
I just wanted to mention, Gillian, that one of the barriers that we hear a lot from people is some people within the partnership not taking on tasks or not coming to meetings, that, you know, there's a handful of people that do the majority of the work. Not always, but sometimes we need to take a look at the level that that particular organization or person is involved at, and maybe they need to move out into the circle. So maybe right now they're at the core, they're on your steering committee, but really it's not practical for a number of reasons. They don't have capacity, they don't have the resources, maybe their mandate doesn't align with yours, but maybe they still want to be supportive. You know, maybe they want to hear from you a couple of times a year and have a coffee and hear about how the project is going, and you hear about how their work is going. It doesn't mean they still can't be involved. It just might mean that you might need to look at the level at which they're involved.
Yeah.
Because there might be a mismatch there.
That's a really great point. Now, when you use a stakeholder wheel as well, you may have some really specific people and organizations on there, and then you may have some ones that seem quite vague, like you don't actually know who to go to, but you know that there's a sector maybe that's missing, and so you want to reach out. So this takes us to our next slide, which is not a tool, but it's a bunch of people working hard. And I just want to share with you and throw out some suggestions of different techniques you can use to go out and find those people in those organizations. So there's asset mapping, which comes from the field of, go back.
Sorry.
Okay. Which comes from the field of asset-based community development, looks at what groups and programs are serving the community both formally and informally. And then from there, you can go out and reach out to those people and organizations. You might surf the net, do community directories, and definitely include phone calls, because talking to people can bring out some of the nuances, and perhaps, you know, you might realize you were asking the wrong questions, searching the wrong, you know, keyword, whereas talking to people, people will help you out. Another approach is network mapping, which looks at who is connected to who. Now, you can do this very briefly on a wall, or you can get into more sophisticated research and analysis. Health Nexus does some of this work. It can help you to identify new people to approach, and it can also help you decide which people are key connectors within your circles or between your circles and another community or sector. So those might be connectors who are already a part of your partnership, and you just want to think about how you're maintaining that connection, or they might not be yet, and you might want to go out and seek connection with them. Just before we leave here, a few don'ts. Don't be discouraged by distance. Both technology and strong partnership links can help overcome this complication. And don't overlook the private sector. Local businesses and chambers of commerce could be partners to you, and in particular, the right person might connect you to another world of influence and resources to your partnership. So now I want to share with you some tools. These are called templates. So they're a kind of tool. They're in Excel. That's why they're called templates. They're very flexible. And they're coming from the Collaborative Leadership in Practice project that Health Nexus did over 2 years with the Ontario Public Health Association. The first one on the left, both of these are listed in the handout that we have for you, and they're on the CLIP website. The one on the left is about engaging equity-seeking groups and analyzing your group membership with an equity lens. So the tool itself provides a long list for you to reference when you are beginning a partnership and when an existing partnership is wanting to take a look at who might be missing and how you might expand the diversity of those equity-seeking voices and organizations around the table. So we suggest you can use this tool in relation to the other work that we covered around connecting to partners, and sort of add this other layer of analysis to this. And it's something that a lot of us, again, we do already, and but this template gives you a long list to make sure that you don't miss out on that particular review that you might do. I want to point out that both of these templates have guides that come with them, so when you go onto the website, there's a whole description of where they came from and how you can use them. The second one on the right is a neat tool that was developed in order to kind of create a space for us to talk about power and equity when we're approaching someone to develop a new partnership. So the template was designed as an aid for an organization with more power that's approaching a grassroots organization, or you might be approaching community at large. They may not be organized in a formal way, and you're looking to partner with them. The prompt at the top on the right of the tool, it says explore your situation. It invites you and a potential partner to begin talking about issues of power, privilege, and marginalization with the question, what is the structural relationship between the potential partners? Please identify access to power, privilege, resources, as well as experiences, different experiences. And then below that, the template offers 3 options for community involvement. The community group might partner to consult, so that's the first row on the left, to collaborate, or to lead the work. You may be approaching a community organization but offering for them to lead the work. I remember one of you was mentioning that you give out $1,000 to community groups every year, so that's that kind of model of partnership where you, in a sense, become the funder and maybe a communication support as well. And then within, on the right, and you don't see all the questions here because the little snip has cut them off, but there's questions to discuss as you explore either one or several of these options with a community group. So the questions ask, what would this type of involvement look like for each partner and role, and to list the concrete examples. The next one over asks, when might this type of involvement face roadblocks or compromise community priorities? So you see it's creating a space for the community. They may have already been thinking about it, and you're creating a space where you might be able to talk more openly together about what could get in the way of the partnership being equitable, or what could get in the way of the community priorities. And the final question, which is further to the right, again, you can't see it here, asks, in what ways can this type of involvement transform power relationships and promote equity? So you're kind of looking at the dangers and what could go wrong, and then you're also looking at what's the potential here if we do this together? How can we transform both the ways, organizations and communities work together, and how can we transform our communities for the better? So as I said at the beginning, these templates are highly adaptable, and I encourage you very much to do that. Tweak the questions, change the boxes, don't treat it like something that is not yours. And that's one of the great tools that this project developed to help us bring an equity lens to our partnership work. And finally, I think this is our last one related to Connect. Hope this is filling a few gaps for you. What does a partnership built on good connections feel like, right? This is a really neat tool that I found, and we've resourced a lot already from the Asset-Based Community Development Institute, which is where you can find this resource. The link is also in the guide we've given you. And it helps you to assess and improve the quality of the partnership spaces that you work so hard to create. You can see here identifying and inviting new members, first visit for a new member, why members keep coming back. That's definitely one to check into. So it gives you space to do an assessment, right? How are we doing? And then it gives you questions to provoke a good discussion to look at how to improve things. So I don't see any comments or questions in the chat related to this.
You must be doing a good job.
But feel free to add them in there. Anything you want to share or any questions that you have. And now we're going to move on to another one of the 6 activities. Andrea.
No, Gillian.
It's still me. Okay, foster share. I was remembering this. I was doing those lengthy ones. I forgot about it. I get to do one short one. Okay, so people have lots of strengths in this area. You all do. Fostering shared understanding. So as you know, what is our strength also becomes our challenge. One of the strengths of partnership is the diversity, right? We draw strength from the differing positions and the differing perspectives that we gather together around one table. So how do we ensure that that remains a strength? Through keen listening and ongoing dialogue and deepening that shared understanding over time. And this also, shared understanding and deepening it also leverages trust, right? It leverages trust and leverages commitment. Andrea, I was thinking about how in our partnership to put on this webinar, and you know, it takes time too, right? We've worked together for a couple of years, and the level of trust is so high, it's so fantastic. You know, it's like one of us starts something, leaves it to the other person edits it, and I'm just like, you know, Andrea won't do exactly what I would do, but that doesn't matter. It's going to be better from the 2 of us working together. I don't have to go over and look at the changes or vice versa, you know. So that's some of the efficiencies you get and the strength when you have a thriving partnership. So I was reflecting on that just now between the 2 of us. So what brings that about and what helps us, you know, to engender that? One of the things, the concepts and approaches that we've been learning more about recently is cultural humility. So you can just from hearing the word imagine what it means. So starting from a position of cultural humility is about openness and ongoing learning to other cultures and people and organizations from other cultures. And culture is not constrained here to talking about ethnicity. It includes organizational culture, professional culture, and different social identity and community experiences. So that openness to ongoing learning, that brings us our shared understanding. And that openness involves a spirit of exploration, sharing of stories, taking the time to do that, eating together, you know, and sharing hopes and dreams. So sometimes it's about icebreakers, but when you get down to the real work, it's about using participatory methodologies as well to deepen and bring out the different understandings through the work you're doing together. I'm going to move to the next slide. So the one tool we wanted to share with you related to this activity today is it's a framework, not a tool, but this is Bruce Tuckman's Stages of Group Development. It's a great frame of reference, and it's been around a long time. And it helps us see, I'm going to take you through it, I guess, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, because I'll bet you a lot of you are. But the stages of group development start with forming and move towards storming. So when we're forming, that's when we're connecting, right? But as we begin to develop shared understanding and work together, all those things that we're doing together, storming can happen. And often that's related to, you know, those different perspectives at the table. And also, it's a good sign of early commitment or ongoing commitment, because if you weren't committed, you would just withdraw, right? So this is a stage where people are starting to commit, or they are maintaining commitment to a partnership by storming. So when somebody's upset or a subgroup comes forward in what may seem very conflictual, we can take that at first as an invitation to re-engage, because they've just shown a commitment to wanting to stay in the connection, in the partnership. So a healthy partnership acknowledges conflicts and looks behind those diverging and different positions to more deeply understand. So this is why we put it under shared understanding. And that can lead your partnership to new levels, to new insights and new innovation. When your partnership is operating ongoing, you're going to circulate through storming, norming, and performing, right? And then if the partnership adjourns, it will fall off to the side and groups will go their different ways. I just want to also point out that this framework can be helpful to think about how an individual group connects to a partnership, because when your partnership already exists and you go and recruit new involvement, or someone shows up and they're curious and they want to get involved, they're at that forming stage, right? And so we have to tend to that relationship in a different way than we tend to the relationships with our partners who we've been working with for years. And also in the same way, we have to create spaces for that person or that organization to put forth what might be differing opinions than the majority who've been working together for a long time, to have a nice quiet storm, maybe not so much like some of the ones we had this weekend, but then to move into norming where then that organization is integrated into the partnership.
I just wanted to mention something I put in the chat box. It's coming a little bit from left field. Of course, when I was a teenager, I had a crush on Hawkeye Pierce from MASH, who didn't. And last week on the radio, I heard Alan Alda talking about this new book that he has. I put links in the chat box. And the book is called If I Understood You, Would I Have This Look on My Face? And it's about how to communicate effectively and how to tailor your message according to the understanding of the other person. So I haven't read the book, but the interview on Q, which I have a link for in the chat box, was really fascinating. So I'm looking forward to reading that book myself, and that might give me some new insights on how to form a common understanding with some of my partners.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to just take this moment to go back, because I think we lost it in our notes, but another resource which is in the handout is the 7 questions.
Yeah.
Do you want to speak briefly about that?
Yeah, I can. I put that in the chat box already, actually. I can't believe we forgot to put this in our notes, because Gillian and I love this tool. It's called 7 Questions to Knowing Your Audience. And we were first introduced to this tool here at Health Nexus about 5 years ago, when we had someone come in and talk to us about a terrible, terrible disease that's making its way through capacity building institutions, which is called death by PowerPoint. And he taught us about the 7 questions to knowing your audience, in that when we sit down to develop a webinar, such as today's, we often think about what are all of the things that I want to tell my audience. And this tool helps you think about it from the perspective of your audience. So what are all of the things that my audience wants or needs to hear? So when Gillian and I were preparing for this webinar, we actually sat down and we thought about all of you. And we thought about those 7 questions, and what are the things that keep you up at night, and what are the things that are frustrating, and what are the things that you love about working in partnership. And we tried to develop our content according to that. You can also use the tool when you're thinking about approaching partners, though, because often when we approach partners, we think, okay, well, this is what I need from my partners. This is why, I'm going to this organization because I need them. But we also have to remember that our partners need things too. Like, they don't just want to partner with us because we think our program is so great. We need to actually understand how our program is going to help them solve a problem that they may have. So do they have a similar mandate that they can't fill, but by partnering with us, then they can? Or are we going to alleviate some kind of pressure point if we can partner with them? So the 7 questions to knowing your audience helps you to think from your partner's perspective. What is it that they need? What keeps them up at night? So then you can tailor your pitch, your partnership pitch, to meet that.
Great. Okay, we're moving on.
Yeah.
And we're moving on to talk about vision.
Yeah, many of the next sections we're going to go through a little bit more quickly, because like Gillian mentioned, according to the registration questionnaire and some of the questions that we've been getting, people really wanted to know a lot more about the connecting and foster shared understanding. So I think probably people are a little bit more familiar with creating a vision. And one of the reasons we need to do that when we're working in partnership is that we each bring our own individual or organizational perspective. We bring our own mandate to the table. But at that table, our task is to seek some kind of common ground. And your shared vision, which can include shared goals, what you want to accomplish together, your shared values, your shared structures, and power sharing agreements, all of those things are going to help you create a shared vision, which is a solid base for your other activities. So up on the screen, I posted a really terrific example, and this is shared from the from Haldeman Norfolk Public Health Unit. So they actually did some community vision. I believe this was back in the Healthy Communities Partnership days. And they had a graphic artist that came to their community vision session and actually captured all of the things that people in that room felt were going to go into a healthy community in Haldeman and Norfolk. We don't all have access to those kinds of resources and talents like graphic artists, but I just love this as an example. The other example I wanted to quickly talk about is a partnership program I was involved in a few years ago called Partnership for Healthy Kids, and it was a school-based program. And I would go in to schools across the province and help them develop a local community action plan. And these were big partnerships. Like some of these partnership groups had 20 different people around the table. And some of them were really diverse. In Thunder Bay, they had the fire chief was on their Healthy Schools partnership because he said, if kids aren't healthy in schools, then I'm going to be putting out their fires when they're adults. I'm invested in being involved in this partnership. And what we needed to do, because people were coming from such diverse backgrounds, sometimes it was the public and the Catholic school board partnering together, there was a lot of difference, and we needed to come up with a common phrase. And I worked with each of the groups to actually come up with a sentence that served as their vision and served as a touchstone. So whenever the partnership was out in public, whenever the partnership had a decision to make, should we apply for this funding, should we promote this particular event, they had that vision statement to go back to that helped them to answer those questions. Now the trick is, it all sounds lovely having a vision statement, but sometimes getting to that stage can be a wee bit on the painful side. And I remember being in these meetings, a 2-hour meeting, and it's an hour and 50 minutes in, and we don't have our sentence yet. We don't have our common vision yet. And the groups were sometimes getting very antsy because we've been in the room for an hour and 50 minutes, and Andrea, why are we spending so much time doing this? But over the course of the 3-year project, I had people come back to me over and over and over and over again and say, Andrea, I'm so glad that you made us do that, because we went back to that sentence all of the time. It grounded our partnership. We knew who we were and what we were doing and what we were trying to accomplish because we spent that time in defining our vision. So as painful as it may or may not be, it's really important to take the time to actually create that. And Gillian's going to paste a couple of things in the chat box, a couple of really great tools. Gillian's favorite, which is called Paper Quilt. And one
I
of
just
my
want to interrupt.
favorites,
The links didn't make it through, but I'm going to fix that.
Okay. And one of my favorites, which is called 124 All, and Gillian's just going to post those up in the chat box for you so you can have access to it. So I'm going to move along to planning collaboratively. So once you're ready to actually begin to work collaboratively, you've found your partners, you have a shared understanding, you've created a shared vision, now you actually get to sit down and do some work. And we have a few pieces of advice here for you. One is that in everything that you're doing is to really encourage collaborative leadership and to support inclusion. And Gillian mentioned the CLIP project. We've got the link to the CLIP website as well as those two excellent templates, the Excel templates that Gillian shared a little bit earlier. That using participatory approaches in clear language can be really, really helpful here. And one of the things that we advocate is that planning, those of you who know me know that there's nothing I love more than planning things. I adore planning things. However, there does have to be a balance between planning adequately and spending all of your time in meetings. So the collaborative planning can take a great deal of time, but there does come a time where you need to actually be implementing the work rather than spending all of your time planning. So we do have a few other tools that Gillian is going to post in the chat box as well. We have a Terms of Reference builder at HC Link that can help you come up with the terms of reference for your group. And we also have a couple of techniques in our Facilitation for Healthy Communities toolkit, appreciative inquiry and generating and prioritizing ideas. So we hope that you'll find those tools helpful. The next activity I'm going to talk a little bit about is working together for change. And this is where we actually get into some action activities which strengthen relationships. And one of the quotes that I really love that we have is that collective action is the glue that bonds many partnerships. When the work hits the ground, the roles of the different partners can often be a little bit more distinct. And it's important to stay connected through plans and meetings and activities and storytelling and reflective discussions. One of the things that I always advocate is once you have developed your action plan or your work plan or your operational plan, whatever you're calling your plan, is to make sure that you do have check-ins, to make sure that the work on that plan is moving forward. We also really recommend that you think about how you as a partnership can communicate effectively, and you can adapt communications as necessary. So for example, there are a lot of groups out there that use online technology, such as a wiki, a software called SharePoint, or even Google Docs to house all of their documents, while for other groups, an email list works best. Some groups use a private Facebook group or something like ning.com as a way for members to communicate and keep in touch, and some groups really prefer to have an email list. One of the partnerships that I'm a part of, we use the subject line of emails to remind each other to get our stuff done. We'll send an email that says action required and then says reply to doodle poll, and so you don't even have to open the email and you know that you have a task to do for that group, so that can be really, really helpful. There's also lots of great tools, practical tools like agenda and meeting note templates and activity checklists and all of those good juicy things. And chances are you already have those or someone you know does, but if you are short on templates and you ever want one, please connect with Gillian or myself because we've got tons and tons and tons of them. I'm going to pass it back to Gillian to talk about consensus decision making. Fun.
Yeah, so partnerships. As partnerships, we need to explore and decide how we will make decisions. And it becomes a chicken and egg because how do we decide? How we want to decide? But eventually we get there, right? Now, no matter what your decision-making rules, you need good process for working together. And that good process will generally follow this pattern of the image at the top of this slide. It starts with an opening, right, with the introduction of whatever the topic is, opening. Then there's discussion. Discussion might be very, very short. It might be quite expansive as the vision development happened, the vision development story that Andrea shared. I love that story. And then finally, you need to move towards synthesis and making that decision at the end, having an idea, making a decision on it. And clarity around these steps of the process will support your decision-making no matter whether you're using Robert's Rules of Order or consensus or other methods. So it so happens that most of the partnerships I find myself in decide to use a consensus-based process. That can involve unanimous agreement, or sometimes it's a modified consensus process where there's an attempt for unanimous agreement, but if that isn't met, then there's a modified level of agreement of decision rules that could be sufficient. Of course, there's also partnerships where we work on a simple majority, and then even within a partnership, there might be certain decisions that are going to be made instead at the executive committee level, or that even a person in charge might decide, right? If we're talking logistics for an event, it doesn't always go to the full, right? It doesn't go to the full group.
Please don't go to the full group.
So there you go, yeah. So people have all kinds of experiences with consensus process, and sometimes that's because we say we're going to use consensus, and then we don't really talk about what that looks like or how it happens. So I've found often in groups that there's an assumption that a lack of anybody expressing concern means that there is consensus among the full group. So that's why I've put over here the little photos in the left of the thumbs process, which I like to use a lot. It's a great process too because it's quick to learn. I sometimes, when I'm just facilitating a group that I've never worked with before, I can introduce it and then we happily use it for the rest of our time together. So let me explain how it works. So one of the things with consensus process, one of the basic principles is that consensus doesn't mean everybody is fully behind an agreement, but it means that we're behind it enough that we can stay with the group. Consensus, the priority of consensus is to maintain the cohesion of the group as you move forward, in contrast to a majority rule where you know, it's fine to move forward with a minority of the group not being in support of a decision. So in consensus, we're seeking to have that a level of unanimity and support that we can move together fully as a group and we're not leaving somebody behind. So the thumbs up means I'm all for this decision. This is great. I'm fully behind it. I'm going to put my stuff behind it. I fully understand why we're doing this. The thumb sideways is I can go with this. You know, I'm willing to move forward, but I'm not fully behind it, or I might have a small concern, which, you know, may or may not be necessary to share at this point, right? Thumbs down is I have a concern that's keeping me from being able to support this decision, or I have, and I'm not able to move forward with the group on it. So if you use this, you have to ask everybody to put their thumbs out wherever they're at. And you can use this, you know, if you're moving into, if we look again at the picture at the top, you know, we open out a discussion, then we're in the middle of the discussion. You might not even be ready to make a decision yet, but you want to get a sense of where how people are feeling about the direction you're going. You could do a thumbs, you know, assessment at that point, and you could find out, you know, maybe there's really only a few people who are really thumbs up about this direction, and they just happen to be very vocal. And so then when you see a lot of thumbs sideways, you might ask those people to speak, share their perspectives, and it might take your group in a whole different direction. They might come up with another option that will move towards a stronger consensus of the group. And then again, when you're making a final decision, you want to make sure that there's nobody with their thumb down. There might be people with their thumb sideways. If you've had a chance to hear from them, if you haven't, you might want to ask them if they want to share. They may or may not feel that it's relevant to share what their minor concern is, but the importance is to know where everybody in the group stands in relation to a decision. So I wanted to share that. And if you want more of a learning opportunity, yeah, Andrea's put up a piece on conflict resolution, and I've put the link to the consensus decision-making website, which has a really great introductory article and also a 1-hour training video. They have a quiz you can take afterwards to see what you learned.
We're obviously really passionate about that one because I posted it and you posted it. So that means it's really good.
Everyone didn't want to miss it. Oh, you had it already. So this is all related to the working together, because at every meeting we make decisions, and then periodically we have big meetings and plannings where we make big decisions. But all of them count in terms of the cohesion and that keeping everybody engaged and excited about showing up. Okay, we are moving on to celebrating, evaluating, and renewing. Sometimes I wonder why these got combined together. But certainly, hopefully, when you evaluate, you have stuff to celebrate, right? And I think
if you don't, then you need to renew. So
then you need to renew, right? And evaluation is always an opportunity for renewal as well. So that's perhaps why they're together in that original framework, and we continue to work with them that way. Anyways, who wants more than 6 activities? Too much to handle. So as we mentioned earlier, a successful partnership is a process, not a destination. And it's a sophisticated process of bringing together different types of folks kind of on a common trip, right? We choose, are you interested in going this way and trying to, you know, take on these challenges, do this parkour together? Now, would you take a trip without noticing milestones, without sharing food, without taking pictures at those different milestones that you reach? Chances are you wouldn't, and yet in partnership, it's quite astonishing how we fail to tend to, right, these activities. Celebrate your partnership overall, and also celebrate it in the small details. We talked about having fun all the time, so bring in those small details and get that person to the table who's going to bring some humor to your meetings as well. So celebration can be a part of every time you're gathering together, and also it's important to find milestones or periodic times once a year where you want to celebrate what you've achieved together, or just how your relationships have changed, how your shared understanding might have deepened. So, and on this trip I want to highlight that evaluation is more than monitoring and measuring your mileage, and we'll consider this in the following slides. Because celebration and meaningful evaluations will renew the clarity and the commitment among your partners. It's not just about did we do it, did we succeed or not. Next slide. Thank you, Andrea. So these are some highlights from a blog post that I came across and published in 2015 and that I really liked. So it was asking about evaluation. How do we stop just measuring impact and start evaluating? How do we get to the how and the why? We might have done a small quantitative evaluation, but we need to go deeper. If we don't take it to the how and the why, what was the point of doing it in the first place, right? Mm-hmm. It's also important to do qualitative, evaluative learning to help us understand what works in our specific context, right? We have this fabulous ability to access all kinds of evidence-based case studies and projects and best practices. It still matters whether this will work under what conditions in our community and in what context and for which groups of people. And for which groups of people within our community it might not work, or it might face some challenges. And so how can we address those or mitigate those? I'm bringing in the health equity impact assessment tool. So that's another importance of going deeper than just measuring impact. And finally, it helps us comprehend what factors are helping and what factors are hindering success so that we can change the way we're working together, and also so we can bring that knowledge and experience to other partnerships we might work on. So before I get into a couple of evaluation tools, I just want to, based on these comments that I just shared coming out of that blog, I want us to think more provocatively about evaluation and what it can be. It's by and large in partnerships, we do the evaluation that a funder required us to do, and that makes it boring, or that makes it stressful. And so we generate a negative emotion around evaluations. So again, I encourage us to maybe change the language of it, talk about evaluative learning. In our first toolkit that we put out, or the first resource we put out through HC Link, we called it the power of reflection, right? So let's start valuing the power of reflection because we do it anyways. And so by doing it maybe in a more intentional and systematic way, we'll be able to gain more benefit from that reflection and that evaluation that we do anyways. So good evaluations that emphasize evaluative learning will help you to make judgments, like to what extent do people experience this group or network as welcoming. They can help you to facilitate improvements, what helps, what hinders, and how could we do things differently. And they can help you to generate knowledge, such as what are the most significant impacts we have made together. And that might have been directly related to the outcomes that you were trying to achieve, and it might have been a complete side trip that you weren't expecting to do, but that actually generated significant impacts for your community and for your overall goals. So in the resource we've shared, in the handout, we've shared a link to the HC Link Digest Plus on evaluation. I just wanted to highlight that Andrea's already put that in our chat box as well. And this was put together by our colleague Rebecca and really pulls together some of the stuff that we've produced, as well as some of the HC Link consultants' favorite articles. Again, that blog post shows up, and favorite tools related to evaluation. Now, if you're particularly short on ideas or feeling short on resources and time, I want to highlight the toolkit that HC Link produced called The Power of Reflection and the Participatory Evaluation Toolkit, because these resources were really developed based on our experience working with partnerships, where we found so many of the evaluation tools and articles and whatnot weren't useful to the partnerships we were working with because they didn't have an external evaluator. We don't have a lot of resources for evaluation, and we're busy, tending to our relationships and trying to get the work done. And so, how can we bring some simple techniques that can match a partnership situation and share those with partnerships across Ontario? So that was the basis for developing these resources that we'll again be sharing with you shortly in the chat box. So I'm going to highlight a few parts of these resources. So the first, they are a complement. There's the Power of Reflection, which is an introductory short resource. It's not as long, it's not as in-depth. and it really shares the stuff that we find we use the most often with groups. And then the full toolkit, called the Participatory Evaluation Toolkit, is quite extensive, has more techniques, but also has more details explaining, you know, the what and the how of participatory evaluation. So a key piece to any evaluation, and these are some questions that can really support group reflection, which is a kind of participatory evaluation, having the right questions, right, the power questions. So here are a series of questions that different age use. So it's after an event or ordeal, organized partnership, maybe advocacy, what happened? And then after we discuss what happened, so what? And then after that, now what? A very different question. Tell a story that illustrates how this experience has made a difference in your life, work, or community. This is something you might bring forward at an annual planning day or after a couple of years and working together. I just want to pause for a moment and highlight an insight that we've been working with another evaluator here at HC Link, that we often, again, because we're often funder-driven in our evaluations, the evaluations are often at the end. And yet when we think about what evaluations were most useful to us as the partners doing the work, it's actually the formative evaluation work we do, so the work we do researching and reflecting before we start or as we start out, and also what we do in the middle. So if it's a project in the middle, maybe we need to put more resources and time to evaluating in the middle of the project or after the first year, and evidently if it's an ongoing partnership, you know, every year, every 2 years, having an in-depth evaluative time. Yeah. So here's a couple of other questions. The third bullet, why do I participate in this group? Well, a partnership is made up of individuals and organizations, so let's have conversations about how this is working for us as individuals and organizations as well, so that we can make sure that we improve things to maintain people's commitment. And then the simple one, which was mentioned earlier, I think, about what can we stop doing, keep doing, and start doing. On the right, you can see here's what the toolkit offers is a variety of different techniques, which are often visual, which are interactive and participatory, to explore a particular question or set of questions. So this one has fish for the big rewards and weeds for the big challenges. So that was adding a little fun into the activity. Next slide. So I just want to define participatory evaluation for you. This is directly from the toolkit. It's to take a participatory evaluation approach means to invite and facilitate more involvement and co-leadership from the people most directly involved with and affected by your activities. So some of these techniques that I'm going to share with you here are really helpful in terms of being visual, some of them being kinetic as well. We get up and we move around the room. They're inclusive of all kinds of learning styles, all kinds of educational backgrounds and experiential backgrounds. And so, so they're conducive to bringing more people into the evaluation work, into designing it, into participating it, into analyzing it as well. So here's 4, and most of these are from the initial resource, except for the spider web, which is in the toolkit. Firstly, the lineups. Lineups involves lining everybody in the room lining up from A to Z, or from whatever your question is, and I'll give you a few examples of questions. And the key thing here is to have people talking while they're lining up, because it's a lot of those little conversations that are happening while the quantitative piece of the lineup is happening, the conversations that people are having, which will bring out that deeper how and why to answer your questions. So with a lineup, you can ask, how well have we met our objectives for this project, from not at all at one end to completely at the other. You could ask people, to what extent are other leaders in your sector or your community aware of the activities and impacts of this partnership, from not at all at one end to completely at the other. So there's a few examples of questions you could ask. With the spiderweb tool, which will come up next, the whole process of how to do this is again defined and described in the toolkit. Each axis here is representing a different element or indicator that you want to evaluate, and it's very flexible. Okay, you can mix in outcome objectives and process objectives. So one of those can be how well did we meet our outcome, how well did we reach all the communities we wanted to reach. But it could also be asking how well did we stick to our values of an inclusive partnership. It can ask how energized are you feeling about coming to meetings. So it gives you, it nicely can reflect the complexity of your partnership work, and it's highly participatory. You can do it just as a full group, or people can do it in pairs, and then you can talk and create a full group version. Head, heart, and feet is a quick feedback method and lots of fun. The head is what are you thinking, what's new, any new ideas. The heart is how am I feeling, and the feet is what do I want to do next, so next step. So you can use it in the middle of something, or you can use it at the end to gather some quick feedback. And finally, the paper quilt, which we talked about in terms of visioning. Here's an example where a paper quilt was used by a subcommittee of a network that was reflecting on how well have we succeeded in moving forward those strategic directions that we identified 3 years ago. And just to share what happened in this situation, the group actually found that they needed to go back to their fundamental mission because they hadn't really moved forward on their strategic directions except for one. And so it made them think maybe we should have a more narrow mission. So I'm going to move really quickly through these next two because we want to save a bit of time at the end for some input, and we have more stuff to share. So we have two tools to share with you which are kind of survey tools, or they have multiple indicators within them. This one is currently only available in French, but Health Nexus is working with the producers of the tool from the University of Montreal to translate it and adapt it and test it. We're going to do some focus testing into English. So you can expect that this will be available in English in the fall. And it really focuses on the 6 requirements for effective partnership work in terms of, is your partnership taking advantage of, that you put all this effort to bring together diverse partners and to find new ways to deal with complex problems. Are we organized and are we acting in a way that's really taking advantage of that strategy, that partnership strategy, which we decided we were going to undertake? It has a really strong equity lens, and we really love it, which is why we've committed to working in partnership, very much a chosen partnership, so it's been quite fun, with this new partner of ours in Quebec, and turning it and making it available for Anglophones. And the next slide is the Wilder Collaboration Factors Inventory in English already, and also available in a software format so that your group can go in and register, and it will kind of spit out summaries for you. I just want to share this. I asked my friend Jane in Peterborough, from Peterborough Public Health, what her experience was using the tool, because I know she's used it and she's recommended it to others. And she said, I've used the online version for a small collaborative between the 2 health units, a research agency, and 1 school board rep. I found it useful as a self-reflection tool. It helped us quickly identify what were common perceptions of strengths and areas to improve. We used the results at the next scheduled meeting of the group to guide our planning for the next year of the partnership. So that sounds like it's accessible and within our resources, so you can give that one a try. So to wrap up, in terms of the 6 activities, as you can see, they cover a lot of territory, but that's what you're doing all the time when we're working in partnerships. We're always doing all these 6 activities. And just to highlight that, 3 to 4 of these activities are really relationship focused. So when people say process matters, well, here we see it in this framework as well, that the process and tending to the relationships and building the trust and building the commitment so that we can really reach those outcomes together that we get to celebrate is so key to our partnership work.
So we have just a few minutes left. We have just talked and talked and talked, Gillian, and one of the things that we hear from people, so we've got another chat box up on the screen for you to share your successes, challenges, questions, your favorite resources, etc. But one of the things that we always hear from folks when they tell us what they're looking for, a webinar and a workshop, etc., they say, I want tools. So boy, have we given you a whole bunch of tools. And you'll see that I put the handout to download box back up on the top right-hand corner of your screen. So if you didn't download the handouts at the beginning of the webinar, you can download them now. And we're just going to, I think rather than having you share in this special chat box I've created here, we're just going to have you maybe share in the general chat box. If you have any questions for Gillian and I, if you have any resources or ideas to share, because we are almost out of time. So feel free to ask those questions right in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen while I just do a very quick little wrap-up, and I'll come back to answer any questions that you may have. So Gillian just mentioned that partnership is really about relationships, and so I don't need to repeat that because I think it's a really powerful message. But the other thing that we just really wanted to mention, and we know that we said this at the beginning, that the 6 activities aren't steps that you do, they're things that you practice throughout the life of your partnership. And when you're having struggles in your partnership, whether people are participating or people aren't coming to meetings anymore, or whatever the challenge you're having in your partnership is, go back to those 6 activities. Remember that there isn't one silver bullet, but there's many things that you need to do to keep your partnership strong. And again, we know we're repeating ourselves. The successful partnership is a process. It's not a destination. And yes, Maniela, the PowerPoint slides will be posted on the website along with the webinar recording and the handouts, and those will be available in the next few days. The slides are mostly pictures, so I don't know how helpful they'll be to you, but that's why we've provided the handouts for you, because they have most of the information that we have drawn on in this presentation. So I just wanted to refresh everyone's memory that that this is just part of a whole series of things that we're doing to really help you work effectively in partnership. So in a couple of minutes when we're finished the webinar, we're actually going to close down the Adobe Connect room, and you'll be automatically directed to an Eventbrite registration where you can sign up for a specific appointment with a specific coach. So I want to talk to Gillian on Tuesday at 10 o'clock. And then you and Gillian are going to chat about you and your partnership and what you learned today and what's resonating and what you're struggling with, and talk a little bit about how you and your partnership can move forward together. And then please do join us for our next online events in September, one in French and one in English. And the sort of culmination is going to be at the HC Link conference in November, which is just going to be the awesomest conference. I really hope that you can all attend. But Gillian and I are going to be doing a workshop, and then Gillian and Patrick will be doing a similar workshop in French on diversity and inclusion in partnership. So how can you work across difference and really talk about ideas around power and privilege within partnership. And of course, all of our educational resources are on our website too. We don't have any other questions, Gillian. We must have done a really good job.
Or I've worn everybody out with a bombarding of tools. But yeah, they will be on the website for you. So when you're refreshed, you can head back to them and share them with your partners. And we always want you to contact us if you have even the slightest question, just like a little 5-minute question, or by email or by phone, or if you want to talk about something bigger. And as Andrea mentioned, we're going to send you on to those of you who'd like to book some time to talk with us now before you lose momentum. We're going to send you there soon.
Okay, Erin, I have just put the handouts back up for you, and they will all be available on our website. The 6 activities and the planning for partnership are already on our website on the resources section, and then the helpful tools, which is a list of all of the resources, that will be posted up within a few days. All right, thank you so much, everyone. So we're going to close down the webinar right now, and we are going to direct you to the online booking for a coaching session, and we're really looking forward to connecting with you and finding out more about you and your partnership.